If you are talking about or viewing a bilobed gland that sits just superficial to the trachea and inferior to the larynx, you are talking about the thyroid. The thyroid is crucial to the body because it is the metabolic regulator for us. It's going to have two lobes, which are connected by what is known as the isthmus, and it will contain multiple structures which are known as follicles, which are hollow spheres which are formed by simple cuboidal epithelial tissue. It is involved in iodine uptake, and in fact iodine is required to produce the hormones that the thyroid produces, which are T3 and T4. Their job is to increase your basal metabolic rate. In other words, use oxygen to produce ATP. Think back to when we talked about the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary will produce a hormone which is known as thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH. When the thyroid is stimulated by TSH, it will produce thyroxine, also known as T4. That holds 4 atoms of iodine. It will undergo a process of deiodination to form triiodothyronine T3, which conveniently contains 3 atoms of iodine. That process occurs mainly in your liver and in your kidneys. So let's look at follicles. Again, they are formed by simple cuboidal epithelial cells. They're going to be surrounded by capillaries, which are going to provide a transport route for the hormones that the thyroid produces. The follicles will contain what is known as colloid. That is going to be composed of miscellaneous dissolved proteins, particularly one that is known as thyroglobulin. It's a globular protein, and it tells you that in its name. This is going to be important because that is the one that will attach to T3 and T4 and help store them in the follicles. T3 and T4 are so important to your body that you generally have about a 2-week supply hanging out in the follicles. In addition, there will be what are known as extrafollicular C cells, clear cells. They are going to be found outside of the follicles, in between the follicles, and you can actually see that marked right here. Here's the wall of a follicle, here's the wall of another follicle, and another one, and another one, and they kind of look like, if you've ever been to a fish farm, they kind of look like the pools of a fish farm, at least to me. The extrafollicular C cells are going to produce calcitonin, which we will talk about in a separate section. Just as a quick refresher, colloids, what are they? They are going to be mixtures where there are tiny little particles that are going to be held in suspension within a solution. They do not precipitate or fall out. And there is a list of the examples. Fascinating, is it not? Now, thyroid hormones, why do we care? Because they're all about glucose metabolism. About 95% of the thyroid hormones are going to be thyroxine, and it is a storage form of T3, so it's considered what is known as a prohormone. T3 is the remaining 5% of the glucose metabolizing hormones of the thyroid. It is extremely potent. So the majority, almost all of it, of T3, T4 attach to what are known as carrier proteins in serum. And this is going to be important because it allows for slow release of those hormones. So you have about a week's supply of T3 and T4 in the circulatory system. You have about 2 weeks supply with the follicles. Don't worry, I won't ask that, but it's one. I put those numbers in there so you have some idea. of how much you have in the body and how important that hormone is, because think about how much you have in the body. And it is free T3 and T4 that are responsible for biologic activity, in other words, glucose metabolism. So what are their functions? Take a look at what their functions are. Holy cow, increased BMR, basal metabolic rate. So they are actually going to help regulate the rate at which you burn calories. They can raise or lower body temperature. They're going to increase protein synthesis. They're going to regulate the growth of long bones in conjunction with growth hormone. They are required for appropriate development of the neural tube as well as its maturation. They're going to help regulate metabolism of not only glucose, but the other macromolecules also. Quick, what are they? The 4 macromolecules. You should know that. They will stimulate vitamin synthesis on a macro level, as in what do they do physiologically to us? They can change your heart rate, change digestive motility, help control muscle contraction, control cell regeneration, and replacement of dead or dying cells. Now, what will limit the production of these 2 crucial hormones? Stress, starvation, beta blockers, corticosteroids, which are going to be produced, hormones that are produced by the adrenal cortex, hence the name cortico, and contrast media, which contains iodine. Cold temperature may increase the conversion of T4 to T3. Why? For those of you who are in 131, you should know this. Remember, we talked about shivering thermogenesis, and we talked about non-shivering thermogenesis. See if you can answer that question. Good luck. If you can't, let me know. We'll go over it in class. Now, we got to talk about the pathologies associated with thyroid and either overproduction or underproduction of some of the hormones associated with the thyroid. So, hypothyroidism in a child is what's known as cretinism. If you have a low BMR as a child, and it is long-term, you will have stunted growth, and you are likely to also have learning disabilities. So, associated with lack of thyroxine from birth or before birth, or it could be due to a lack of a thyroid gland or sufficient amounts of iodine. And you literally can have severe and irreparable mental defects, cognitive deficits, emotional deficits, stunted physical growth, as well as reduced growth and therefore reduced functionality of many organs. Very sad. We rarely see that in developed countries like ours now. Now, in adults, it's known as myxedema. Actually, myxedema is severe hypothyroidism. Unknown why, but it usually affects females. May have something to do with menopause, low BMR, lack of physical and mental vigor. You tend to put on weight, you tend to be edemacious, and you tend to have what seems like thicker skin, as well as the symptoms of all those hypothyroid symptoms that are listed on the diagram. I would know those if I were you. Interestingly, when a patient walks into your exam room, you can tell a lot about them. You can tell a lot about them by the way they walk in, about whether or not they're bright and alert. And you can tell a lot by their skin, what color their skin is. Are they ashen? Are they yellow? Are they orangey? Do they have good color? Or they have high color? Take a look at their nails. If they have brittle nails and they have this sort of ridging, it might be a sign of hypothyroidism. But you should know all the others also. Now, the autoimmune version of hypothyroidism is Hashimoto's disease. So literally, you have antibodies that are attacking your own thyroid cells. And the symptomatology will be the same as myxedema. The etiology is different. Hashimoto's is the autoimmune version of hypothyroidism. A few facts about hyperthyroidism. Approximately 1 out of every 5 people in the US is hypothyroid. And about half have been diagnosed or are aware they have it. And 97% of those are Hashimoto's. So 97% of those cases are autoimmune cases.